some time ago, I made a video reviewing something a bit like this. It's a little kit containing a tiny cast iron skillet and some ingredients to make a baked item inside that skillet. This is a cinnamon roll. I think the other ones were like a chocolate chip cookie, and I can't remember the other one. Anyway, so we had that, and I had the little pan, and I used the little pan for a few things, including a tiny cooked breakfast. And then we redid the kitchen, and somewhere along the way I decided the little pans weren't worth keeping, and we sent them to a charity shop. And then subsequently I regretted it a little bit. So anyway, this year, in the January sales, I bought this. This was £6.99 reduced by 30%, so £4.89 in the range. And this one's one to make a cinnamon roll in a little pan. And there's also this, which, if you've seen the thumbnail, won't be a surprise. The Gingerbread Man baking kit, pointlessly gendered. Anyway, this one's got an odd-shaped pan, but I just thought that was interesting. There was also another one that was to make a donut, and it had a round pan, which seemed to have like a little bump in the middle of it, so that the donut comes out with a hole in the middle. I didn't get one of those because it just seemed like a silly thing. Not that any of these are particularly sensible. So there's ingredients on the side here. And you will need, wait a minute, maybe these don't have ingredients in them. I think we probably ought to open up, but before we do, let's have a look. Oh, it has got ingredients. Okay, so care instructions for skillet. Wash and dry thoroughly with a sponge or stiff brush before brackets reuse and storage. Rub a small amount of vegetable oil onto skillet after every use. Acidic foods must not be left in the skillet before or after cooking. Hand wash only, not suitable for dishwasher. Always allow your cookware to cool before cleaning. Always use nylon or wooden cooking utensils on a skillet. Suitable for electric, gas stove top and oven only. Not suitable for microwave or induction cooker. Do not use this skillet over 250 degrees Celsius. Always preheat the oven before cooking to obtain optimum performance. Caution, skillet will become very hot when in use. Duh. Always use oven gloves when handling. And then there are these little symbols here. Gas, conventional oven, electricity, electricity, electricity. This also contains cinnamon roll mix, 60 grams estimated, and cinnamon sugar, 7 grams estimated. And this one's the same, largely the same label, except obviously the nutritional information is different and the ingredients are different. So in ingredients on the cinnamon roll mix, ingredients: wheat flour, sugar, whey from milk, potato flakes, raising agent E450, acidity regulator E330, emulsifier E481, salt, flavourings may contain soy and egg. Cinnamon sugar ingredients: sugar, cinnamon powder. On the gingerbread, though, we've got wheat flour, sugar, dextrose, brown sugar, salt, ginger, cinnamon, flavourings, colour E150A, raising agent E500, may contain milk, soya and egg. Right, so we do have to add some things to this, which is interesting. Anyway, let's get them open. So, there we go. That contains a bag of flour with curious little granules in it, and some cinnamon sugar. Fine. And the little pan, which is no surprise, with a completely unnecessary plastic wrapping on the handle here. I wonder how many people just forget to take this off, or don't even realise that they should, and then put it in the oven and burn the plastic. I'm guessing not many people, but also probably not zero either. Anyway, there's the little pan, very similar to the ones we had before, a little bit shallow to be useful for anything other than this novelty recipe. But anyway, got another one of these little pans now. I'm going to keep this one because I have got a use for it. And the gingerbread pan. Run as fast as you can. You can't catch me. I'm the gingerbread pan. Well, do you know what? It's not even the same shape as the thing on the... That's actually quite a nice... This is just a very weird shape, isn't it? It's a kind of flattened, like Roblox gingerbread man. Right, well, there we go. So a vaguely gingerbread person-shaped pan, although I am disappointed because that actually is a nicer shape than that. in my view. So this is, again, they're giving me this thing with curious blobs of something in there, little granules of something. So that then is just a mixture of flour, sugar, ginger, and cinnamon, and some colourings. So you have to add some butter, an egg, and vegetable oil. So you kind of have to add half the ingredients yourself. Okay, well, whatever. Right then, so off to the kitchen now, and we will make both of these, and we'll see what they come out like, and then we'll see how useful. I'm not going to keep that pan afterwards. Do you know what? If that had been that shape, I might have kept it, but it's not even as described. But of course, this will say serving suggestion somewhere on it, which means it hasn't got to look exactly like that. So this one, the cinnamon roll, is even worse. So this one, you need to add some yeast, some more sugar for activating the yeast, melted butter, some vegetable oil, and then we need to also add the icing, which is this stuff on here, which is then icing sugar, melted butter, drop of vanilla extract, and some milk. So you pretty much have to bring everything you need to make these. Off to the kitchen now, and we'll try and make these things. The pans have been washed and rinsed per directions. And now we're just going to try and make these kits. So that's the one for the cinnamon roll mix. Okay, we have a problem here in that I've just opened this pack of flour for the cinnamon roll mix, and it smells awful. Now, I did notice when I made these, was it the year before last, when I made one of them was a cookie and one of them was something else, there was a stale smell or stale taste to the mix, and it's the same again here, but worse. There is a stale, musty hardware shop sort of smell to this, you know, like dog biscuits or something like that. It's that kind of stale grain aroma to this. I don't really want to eat that. Now, it's not out of date or anything like that. This obviously was reduced, but you know, it's only January. It's only mid-January when I'm making this. So if this was to be given as a gift for Christmas 2024, it is not unreasonable to be making this in mid-January 25, a mere 2 and a bit weeks later. I'm just trying to see if there's our best before 20th of February 26. So definitely not out of date, but it stinks. I wonder if the gingerbread one is the same. Now, the gingerbread mix has got some spices mixed into it, I think, into the flour. So that may mask the aroma. No, it doesn't. Okay. Okay, well, we have a problem here because I don't really think there's much point making these if I'm not going to taste them. And it really does smell awful. I suppose I could take it back. I could take these back and get a refund. I don't think it's actually worth the journey. But let's see what we can do to salvage this in some way. I think what I'll do to try to salvage this video, at least anyway, is I'll make something myself. And we'll cook it, or at least some of it, in these pans. And see where we go from there. So yeah, try and make the best out of a bad job here, really. But I'm disappointed. Disappointment sometimes implies surprise, but I don't think I'm all that surprised in this case. I've made these kits before and they weren't great. I think they're worse this year than ever before because they say kit. And I mean, is something really a kit if you have to add more than half of the items to it to make it look like that or that? Is it really a kit to make that if it only contains a bag of flour and sugar? Not quite a kit, is it? So yeah, like I say, disappointed, but not very surprised. I think I just need to regroup now and figure out what my actual strategy is going to be today. And then I'm back in a moment, I suppose. Okay, so here's what I thought. I don't want to go and make a whole batch of gingerbread men and a whole batch of cinnamon rolls. What if gingerbread men and cinnamon rolls had a baby? I'm going to try to make gingerbread rolls. So first I need to make a bread dough. Using my spreadsheet, I've designed a recipe that's going to be about 1/3 wholemeal, 1/3 white, and 1/3 of my kind of sub-keto recipe. So I've got 150 grams of wholemeal bread flour, 150 grams of white bread flour, 70 grams of vital wheat gluten, 40 grams of oat bran, and 50 grams of milled flaxseed, linseed. Linseed, flaxseed, two different names for the same thing. A teaspoonful of sweet cinnamon, about a teaspoonful there. Teaspoon measure won't go in this silly little jar, so we'll use the half measure. I'm going to put in a teaspoon and a half, so that's 3 halves, of ground ginger. Now I'll just mix all of those dry ingredients together. Now this is going to be a yeasted dough. Right, there we go, dry ingredients mixed. Nearly forgot the salt, about half a teaspoon of salt. Now this step should not be strictly necessary because I'm using fast action yeast, but I'm going to bloom my yeast. So I've got about just less than a teaspoonful of fast action baking yeast there. And I've got that in 50 ml of warm water. And we'll just give it a little boost of sugar. So about half a teaspoonful of sugar there. Just mix that in, and I'm going to leave that in a warm place until that froths up. Really just so that I can be sure my yeast is going to be super active when we mix the dough. This is also a good way, if you've got yeast that you've had in the cupboard that you suspect might have been there a little bit too long, this is a good way of checking whether it'll still work. So while we're just waiting for that yeast to bloom, which it's doing by the way, I'm going to get the wet ingredients ready. So I need 291 grams or mil here, because 50 mils in with the yeast, so 341 mil in total. But I thought actually what we might use is this. This is cardamom flavoured evaporated milk, given to me as a gift for Christmas. A lot of the time my relatives give me weird stuff in a can for Christmas and birthdays. But this is one we've already featured on Weird Stuff in a Can. And yes, you did just see me use the ring pull. I'm going to use about 60 grams of this stuff. That's about half the can, I think. The other half I will save to go in my coffee. Plus, I think we'll also treat as a liquid ingredient blackstrap molasses. I heard this stuff's good with potatoes. And we'll have, let's see how we get on. We'll have about 30 grams of that to take us up to 90 or so. Not quite the same thing as black treacle. So we have black treacle here in the UK. Molasses is not quite as sweet. And then I just need to make that up to 291 with warm water. So this is just literally water that's about the right temperature to put your hand in and feel nothing apart from wet. Just make that up to 291. There we go, near enough. So that's my liquid ingredients. Well, that was quite a pleasing colour transition. Now, if you're trying to follow along with this recipe and you can't get hold of this stuff, which would have come from probably a little Indian supermarket or something like that, but if you can't get this stuff and you want to reproduce this recipe, then just some regular evaporated milk or even just milk and a little bit of cardamom, probably about a quarter of a teaspoonful of ground cardamom. Yeast, as you can perhaps see, has gone nice and frothy. Time to put this all together. Now, in a regular bread dough, I would probably put a little bit of oil because it just makes a softer crumb. But since we're making a kind of gingerbread or a cinnamon bun type of thing, we're going to go for 25 grams of butter. And I'm just going to melt that in the microwave. Melting butter in the microwave sometimes takes a tiny bit of finesse, just because it takes a mere second to go from not quite melted to exploding. But keep an eye on it would be my advice. So then in also goes my wet ingredients and my yeast mix, which is the last 50 ml of water as well. Now I'm just going to give that a little mix by hand just to get the liquid down to the bottom. In fact, that's quite a nice mix just to mix by hand. But I'm going to get the dough hooks in there and give it a little mix just to get it really, really thoroughly combined. Okay, and you can tell that's coming together into a bread mix because the dough hooks came out more or less clean. So that means the gluten is all clinging to itself there, because obviously there is that extra gluten that we put in there in addition to the bread flour. Cover that up and whisk it away now to the airing cupboard where it'll be nice and warm, and we'll leave it there until it doubles in size. Cinnamon buns have a layer of cinnamon sugar inside of them. They're very similar to something called a Chelsea bun, which has a layer of fruit in there, dried fruit like raisins and whatnot. So I'm going to fill mine with something that's a bit like mincemeat. And it's a bit like the mincemeat I made in my mincemeat French toast sandwich thing in the Advent Calendar series. So we've got 125 grams of mixed dried fruit. This is a mixture of raisins, currants, sultanas, and candied citrus peel. I've got 50 grams of unrefined brown sugar. I've got 60 grams of walnut halves, which I'm going to chop up so they're not going in there just yet. I've also got 25 grams of preserved stem ginger in syrup. This stuff is amazing. And a blood orange. So the zest of this orange is going to go in there first. Now, I love January because blood oranges are in season. And they are a very seasonal thing. So anyway, the zest of the blood orange is going to go in there like that. Let's have a look and see what this one looks like inside. So not especially red, this one, actually. Often they're a lot darker than that, but there we go. And I find blood oranges have got a unique flavour, and I really like them. They're only available for a month or two at the start of the year, so I always make the most of them. So I just want the juice out of these. And that's going to go into there. Ideally, I would have been making this the night before to give this juice a chance to soak into these fruits. But last night I didn't know I was going to be making this at all because I didn't know that these were going to be a fail. So I'm just going to put a little bit extra liquid in there and hope for the best and hope that that really hydrates the fruit during cooking. So that's what we've got in there so far. Quite a wet mix, but hopefully that will allow the fruit to have a little soak before the bread proves. And then normally I might get the food processor out for chopping up the walnuts, but there's not very many things to chop up here, so I think we'll just do that by hand. I could of course have bought chopped walnuts. But I think you get better quality if you buy them whole. Well, that's half of them. And then same thing with this ginger, which is going to be a little bit messy. So this was just this stuff. Stem ginger in syrup. And it is just so fragrant. I'll just make sure. I don't want to chop it down to pulp, but it needs a bit of chopping or else it's not going to distribute through the mix. Right, that's now the mix. And as I say, still a little bit on the wet side, but cover that up now. And then we'll just wait for the dough to prove. Actually, I don't want to waste that little bit of syrup. Time has elapsed and the dough is coming up to about double its original volume. So that has done its bulk fermentation. The mixture, the mincemeat mixture, actually has taken up that liquid pretty well. There is a bit of syrupy liquid in the bottom there. That won't go to waste. We are ready to try to assemble some buns. Flour our work surface and the dough can come out. Now bear in mind this is gingerbread as in bread, not a biscuit dough. And a little bit of flour on the hands and I'm just going to work that and knead it a little bit just to knock the air out of it because we need to work it back to something I can roll out. Now because it's got all that extra gluten in it, the added gluten, that's part of that sub-keto recipe. and that's to balance the oat bran and flaxseed. But because it's got that extra gluten in it, it does tend to go ever so bouncy. So we may have fun and games rolling it out. We shall see. I'm going to reserve a small portion of the dough for something else, but most of it is going to be made into buns. So again, flour the work surface, flour the dough, flour the rolling pin as well, why not? And then we're going to roll this out, and it's going to resist me and fight me. And I could, you know, leave it for a while and let it relax. You can let time do this, so I could roll it out like that, cover it, come back in 10 minutes, give it another roll. But actually, if I just keep on going, it'll be fine. Just roll it and hold it, and then that will help it to maintain that rolled out shape. It is a very, very elastic dough. Right, I think that'll probably do it. And so using a slotted spoon, so we don't get the syrup. We don't actually want the syrup at this point. We'll spread most of this mixture across the top of the dough. And then we'll just distribute that as best we can and as evenly as we can. And this isn't an authentic Chelsea bun recipe because I don't think Chelsea buns have nuts in them, or preserved orange peel, or ginger, or anything else. This is a recipe I'm just kind of making up on the fly here, really. So hopefully it'll work. Okay, and we're going to leave a little edge along there, which I'm just going to wet down. Just brushed a bit of water on there. Okay, and then we start to roll. We could probably do this using the silicone mat, yeah. So I can start it off like that. And I'll just roll it up. Rolling it up into a long Swiss roll. Okay, next phase has to take place on a board, because last time I cut on one of these mats, I cut the mat. You may recognise that the colour of the mat has changed versus previous videos, because we used to have a red pastry mat, and unfortunately I cut it right down the middle, just with a palette knife actually. So that can go out the way for the moment. And because I'm now not working on a silicone mat, I can use the sharp knife. So how many of these do I want? How many buns do I want to cut this into? I think we maybe do smallish ones actually, so we'll definitely cut it in half, and we'll definitely cut the halves in half. Do we want them that size or 1/3 of that? I think 1/3. Okay, I'm just going to cut them that thickness now and see how many we get. A couple of scrappy bits of dough at the end. Not really sure what I'll do with those. First, the little skillet, which I'll give it a good brush with oil. I'll have 2 in here, like that, and squish those down. Now don't worry that squishing them down is making a horrible mess of them, because these still have to prove, so they are going to spring back up a little bit. But the rest of these now, I'm going to arrange them on this tray and then give them a squish down. Give them enough space to, when they prove, they will expand a little bit. So we're just going to make an awful mess here. I think I will put that one in the middle, and I'll put that one in the middle of there. And just with the heel of my hand, I'm going to squish those down just to spread them out a little bit. That helps the fruit and everything to bond and bind inside the bun as well. I'm not just making that up. Okay, those need to prove now. But there was also one other thing to do, and that's with this last little scrap of dough, which we set aside. And my thought here is I'm going to make something a bit like an Eccles cake. Well, not the right dough, because an Eccles cake would be flaky pastry, but something like that anyway. Oil this pan. This pan is just not going to be worth keeping after this exercise, I don't think, because it's just such an awkward shape. Anyway, yeah, I think I might roll that out a little bit more. Okay, and then we'll have that pastry in there like that for now. We'll have the fruit on top of it. Spread that out into the extremities, such as they are. Okay, and then see if we can make this into the right shape to fit back in the pan. There, something like that, but with that bit of pastry over there. Now, as it stands at the moment, that's not going to stay together very well, but if I do that, and then that, and then give it a squish, is it gonna conform? More or less. I could go over this with the rolling pin to try to get it into the edges. Well, we will see. Kind of. So this lot's got to go back to the airing cupboard now to prove for probably half an hour, 3/4 of an hour, until the dough comes back up, and then it can go in the oven. Okay, these have all doubled in size again now. These are looking all right. I think they would have been better with more spirals. That's a good one. That's a good one. Maybe that one. The rest of them are looking a little bit sad because they've only got almost just one spiral. Perhaps if I'd rolled it the other way. Anyway, too late for that now. I think the little gingerbread person here needs some steam vents. So I'm just going to cut a couple of little holes there. Maybe 3. And then these need to go in the oven. I think the cast iron ones will go on the higher shelf because there's a little bit more thermal mass to overcome there. The boxes for these just had icing on top of them. I want to make a cream cheese topping to go on them, which is, you know, I think just going to be a bit more interesting. I have no idea what proportions I'm going to use here, so I'm going to weigh it as I go and I'll tell you what I'm resolving. This is mascarpone cheese, so we're going to have about 150 grams of mascarpone. And then I've got some plain natural yogurt. This is a really creamy, strained natural yogurt. So we're going to have 75 grams, looks about right. And some of the syrup from this stem ginger. And I think this is going to be like, yeah, just 20 grams. And I'm going to whisk that together and we'll see how we get on with it. Just going to have a taste of it. Could do with a little bit of acidity. So just going to have the littlest squeeze of lemon juice in there and then whisk that in. Getting there. I actually think we could stand to have a little bit more of this lemon. I think that's about right. Apart from the syrup, that, by the way, is a piece of ginger that escaped the jar. I haven't had to add very much sugar to this, apart from the syrup which is probably about maybe 10 grams of sugar, because mascarpone is really quite a sweet cheese already. That's going to go in the fridge until we need it. Okay, time to get these out. Now I did a little switcheroo about halfway because the stuff at the top was cooking faster than the stuff at the bottom, even though it's a fan oven. I think those look all right. Just have to remember not to touch these handles. Now, while they're all still warm, this is the syrup that was left over after soaking the fruit. I'm just going to brush that onto the top surfaces to glaze them. It's actually sizzling as it hits the pan there. And this is going to go all sticky, hopefully. These were at the top of the oven to start with. So I think these have actually overcooked a little bit. These, I think, are just about right. So I'll give them a good daub with this syrup. Right, now I know there's enough to go round, I can go back and just touch up the bits that look like they need a bit more. Now I've just got to let these cool completely before we can put the cream cheese on, because otherwise it will just melt. Okay, these have all cooled down now, and I think that they are a little bit overdone actually. I think especially this one here is just a little bit frazzled. But remember, there's molasses and dark brown sugar in here as well, so perhaps not as burnt as they look. The bread is still soft. This gingerbread person with a weirdly square head, I wonder if they made the thing so that they can sell it as a teddy bear or a snowman. You know, it's like one size fits all. Again, this has come out nice and soft. I think these will come off the tray okay. Yes, they do. All as one unit. I'm going to put some of that cream cheese topping on some of these and we'll give them a taste. Now I have got a piping bag, but it's a little bit too big for this application. The one I've got is for whipped cream. So we will improvise. I'm just going to cut the tiniest corner off of this bag here. Okay. So let's see if we can decorate these. I mean, that's not terrible. Perhaps we'll just try that again. That's not bad, is it? Okay, what about this guy? Using the box as a guide. So, got little zigzaggy things on his feet. That's difficult. Yeah, that's a bit of a mess. Little buttons. And a bow tie. Something like that. Eyes. And a mouth. I mean, it's the same picture. Okay, time to have a little taste of one of these, I think. So, okay, several things. Firstly, the spicing is just right. The fruit is still a little bit hard. I think if I'd made that the night before, or perhaps if I'd simmered that a little bit just to accelerate the soaking, that would have been better. And I think 5 minutes less baking. I checked on 5 minutes before the end and they didn't look like they were quite as toasty as they should be on top. I left them in there another 5 minutes. I think that was too much. I should have pulled them at 20 minutes. So that should have been 20 minutes at 180 Celsius fan. Apart from that, they do taste good, but they need a bit more of this. So I think for this one I'm taking to Jenny. I'll do that. I mean, you could just do that. Only a couple of things left to do now, which is I'll take this one to Jenny. I'll report back. So Jenny's opinion was, and I quote, but I think also this guy, we need to have a look inside. Oh, I didn't show you the back. The back of, yeah, there you go. So the bread dough did all join up, but it does look a bit awful. Anyway, we need a cross section. So what do you reckon? Like that? Diagonal? Now, a bit hollow and a bit uneven top and bottom. I don't think I'd get a Paul Hollywood handshake for that. Studio Shrimp here with some thoughts and conclusions. The kits themselves are a disappointment as a whole, but as I say, not a surprise for reasons I've already discussed to death. One thing I will mention again is that I'm a little bit concerned about whatever's causing that stale smell in the ingredients pack. It's a bit of a tired meme to be perennially suspicious of food products imported from China, but I figured I should probably mention it. It might be nothing more than a thing that happens when flour is packaged in very small quantities. When it's in bulk, maybe it's less vulnerable to spoilage from fluctuating environmental conditions, or maybe this batch of product was imported in a container that also had something that was emitting smelly volatiles or something. Interested to hear your thoughts on this. The pans themselves. The round skillet is the same as before, cute but a little bit shallow to be very practical. I'll probably keep the round one though, because I might use it for trying to cook or warm things on the living room wood stove. The supposedly gingerbread person-shaped pan is probably just too annoying to keep, but I won't dispose of it just yet in case anyone suggests some genius idea for using a pan of exactly this shape. I did try to cook a 1-egg omelette in it and it did not go well. It's just a bit awkward really. Might work for little pancakes. Thoughts on my gingerbread buns, bearing in mind this was a prototype recipe. They sort of worked. Here are the changes I would make next time. The fruit mix definitely needs to sit overnight to hydrate properly and maybe with more liquid. For the dough, I think it was a mistake to use the sub-keto component in the bread sheet. I think that's part of what made them a bit chewy and tough. Next time, I think I'll just go for 50-50 wholemeal and white. The ingredients list for that is on the screen right now, and it does affect both wet and dry mixes. I think leaving out that extra gluten will allow the dough to roll out thinner more easily, and this will enable it to be rolled up into spirals that have more whirls, which it definitely needed. And they were a touch overbaked, so only 20 minutes at 180 Celsius fan next time. So I'd say it's a viable recipe with those adjustments made. The flavour was good, the combination of cardamom with the ginger and cinnamon was great. The fragrance of the stem ginger was present in the filling, and of course in the syrup that I whipped into the cream cheese topping. I think I'd probably put a bit more of that stem ginger in next time because it was really, really good. That was my kind of, abortive review of these mini skillet kits. I hope that's been interesting. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.